Welcome to the WhoseShoes. I'm an NHS obstetrician, hoping to share some thoughts and experiences about my working life. Perhaps you enjoy Call the Midwife, maybe birth fascinates you, or you're simply curious about what exactly an obstetrician is. You might be pregnant and preparing for birth. Perhaps you work in maternity and want to know what makes your obstetric colleagues tick, or you want some fresh ideas and inspiration. Whichever of these is the case, and for that matter, anyone else that's interested, the WhoseShoes is for you. Episode 67, Magic Mates. Today, I'm extremely excited because I have with me my great friend Gill, who's also known as WhoseShoes. And if it wasn't for Gill, I wouldn't be here at all. I certainly wouldn't have a podcast and I wouldn't have done like a million other things. So welcome, Gill. Perhaps, I don't know if you want to say a bit about who you are, or maybe we'll start with who you are.
Okay, so hi Flo, I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this. It's such honour is not the word we use. It's just great, it's just really good fun. And so I'm Gill Phillips, the creator of a tool or approach called WhoseShoes, which is based on a board game, but it's a lot more than that in terms of connectivity and trying to bring people together who want to make positive change. And it was a conversation when Flo phoned me up out of the blue, what would it be, 7 years ago, I think? Something like that.
Yeah, I think it is now, yeah.
And you said, I'm new to Twitter, which I thought was interesting. And I've been watching what you're doing around dementia care. Do you think WhoseShoes would work in maternity? And that's kind of like really where the story started.
Yeah, I'd seen your tweets. I think you might have been wandering around Paris at a conference. And I thought, this looks interesting. And then I saw the dementia workshops in Kent, where there was lots of bunting and cake and people drawing. And I thought this looks really fun. And I really wanted to kind of start a conversation and get people thinking about maternity and most importantly, maternity experience. And you kind of drew me in, I think.
Well, that's really nice. And I've forgotten that actually, but I remember now that was the Quality and Safety Forum in Paris, which was an enormous big deal for me, to be invited to speak at something like that. And I had quite a big slot at it. And I remember doing stories around, I didn't want to be there on my own. I wanted to bring all my network with me. So in some ways, in terms of, I'll perhaps mention later on Wildcard, that was the same idea that I wanted to kind of share the experience and help other people to feel that they could be there too and contribute and get things going on Twitter. So interesting to reflect on that.
Yeah. So you and I started working, I think you're right. I think it was 2014 and we were going to do, I seem to remember you taking a photo of my notes in my notebook, which was a very small pilot.
That's right.
Starting doing some WhoseShoes work in maternity. And we've kind of blossomed from there, I guess.
I think we have.
So I think that the project is kind of I was going to say long gone, but it's not long gone. It's not a project. It's just a thing. It's a ever evolving, ever changing beast, I guess. But I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today is I feel you kind of unleashed in me this whole different aspect of being an obstetrician and being a doctor, and not just the day-to-day clinical stuff. I mean, I shouldn't say just, because that's obviously very important, but you gave me a whole different aspect of life, which I kind of have run away with, I suppose. So I wanted to talk a bit about meeting someone and working with someone who just gives you energy and takes you in a whole new direction you kind of never imagined.
And it's lovely to hear you say that, but it's been so fascinating watching that, perhaps egging you on a bit for certain things. I think the blog story is quite hilarious. Did we mention one blog flow? One blog flow was basically me asking you if you could please do a blog, and don't know whether I've got time, and then now you're writing for the BMJ and doing stuff with the RCOG, and that's kind of like an extension of that original blog, I think.
Yeah, so when I wrote my blog, my husband was, I can't remember why he was a bit annoyed with me. Maybe it was just keeping me too busy, or I don't know. But
I think that was it.
I said, yeah, don't worry. It's just, I'm doing it for Gill. It's only one blog. It's just going to be the once. And yeah, then I discovered I liked writing. I mean, I don't know how many blogs I've written now. And I've written poems, which I didn't imagine writing either.
So the funniest one for me was when we were doing our Nobody's Patient project, which we might come on and talk a bit more about, because it's been so important and so impactful, really. But I remember we had to do a monthly report for NHS England, and it was you and not me who said, let's do it as a Stella story. And we ended up doing our monthly reports. Basically, I think people have got different understandings of what rules are, and a monthly report you would expect to be a written report that goes on a shelf, and if you're lucky the person who commissioned it will read it, but probably not. And this way we were doing, and we were enjoying doing our monthly Stella stories, and they really attracted a very wide readership, so it felt worthwhile and it was fun to do.
Yeah, and Stella stories, that was another thing you got me into, because I think we were getting the train back from somewhere and it was November, and we started talking about doing a Matex advent calendar. So we'd done a Matex alphabet before, going through the letters of the alphabet, thinking about all the kind of words that would make a good maternity experience. And we were coming up to December and we thought we could do an advent calendar. And I was thinking about how we might open a door. And so you showed me Stella stories. And
is that what it was?
Rather than opening a door, we ended up doing between us a story every day of December for Advent. I mean, there was a point in the middle of it when I thought, what's she got me into now? Like, I'm spending ages doing these stories, but I think that's the main thing for me. Like, you push me way beyond my comfort zone, and it's like I was thinking about this in the run up to today. It's slightly like having, partly a friend that gets you up to no good, but also almost like having a big sister that dares you, right? I dare you to go and do this, and then you get into trouble, and then the person who dared you, they're nowhere. I mean, that's not to say you leave me nowhere, but I feel like you dare me to do things. So you, in the early days when we were doing the pilot workshops, which ended up being 5 maternity experience pilots in London, you, I think, contacted the Royal College of Midwives and the president of the Royal College of Midwives, which was Leslie Page. And because you'd done that, it was kind of, I better contact the president of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, hadn't I? So I emailed him about what we were doing. It was David Richmond. And he emailed back that he was really interested and would I like to come and meet him. And it's the only time I've ever had a one-on-one meeting with the president of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And I remember arriving at the building and they were, would you like a tea or a coffee? And come into the kind of presidential suite executive rooms. And because I'd brought the WhoseShoes board game with me, which it's not an easy thing to transport. I had it in a bin bag because when I was leaving home, it was raining and that was the only thing it would kind of fit in to keep dry. So I turned up for this very important meeting. They showed me in to the president and David Richmond was very gracious. And I pulled out a bin bag and laid out the board game on his table. And I never would have dared do anything like that in my life. and I suddenly thought, what am I doing here? Like, not only have I got a one-on-one meeting with this very important person and I'm telling him about the things I'm passionate about and women's experience of maternity care and what I'm trying to achieve, and he's giving me his time, but I'm in his office laying out a board game. It's just kind of nuts.
And I think you never look back from that, because I remember which event was it? Was it the launch of the National Maternity Review? And I got called out for an interview, and by the time I came back, you got the board game out and you were showing it to Baroness Cumberledge.
Yes, so I think it was called Birth Tank. It was It was a stakeholder event. And yes, I think inspired by my sort of slightly rebellious bit at the college, I brought the board game and I bought one of Anna's graphics. So Anna, the fantastic graphic facilitator who did so many beautiful and still does so many beautiful pictures for us. I pulled out her graphic and the game, and I think it was a coffee break. So there was a small shelf at the side of the big hall we were in, and I just put out the board game on that and stuck up the graphic with some blue tack. And yeah, Baroness Cumberledge was kind of turned around and went, what's that? And was really fascinated and really interested. And it really grabbed her attention. And yeah, I never would have done anything like that. I probably wouldn't have dared speak to her. So I think, yeah, there's so many things that I've done because of working with you, because you kind of energize me and provoke me and dare me, and that's unleashed this really creative side of me, which I really enjoy. I think that's the main thing. It's hopefully doing good and changing things for women and families, but it's just so much fun, really fun.
And I think, it's interesting hearing you talk like that, because you're obviously naturally very creative. And I quote you as someone who's one of the most creative users of WhoseShoes. So some people see it as a big workshop. And obviously that's the thing that people hear about most and is on Twitter. But the way that the one that really cracked me up was you putting a copy of the board game on a hospital trolley and taking it around the ward. Tell us about that. Yeah,
it's a delivery trolley. So we have these metal trolleys and they have a top and a bottom and 4 legs with wheels so that you can push your delivery pack or your equipment around. And yeah, I just stuck the board game on that, and I put some strawberries and biscuits and stuff on the bottom shelf to, give people a bit of an incentive to come and talk to me. Yeah. It was good.
And I think, incentives have been a big part of what we're doing. I can't believe how people go crazy for the little croc shoes. So
totally.
And you had one at the beginning on your handbag, didn't you? The very first workshop.
Oh, I still have. Absolutely. It's still attached. The little chain that hangs off, that broke. So I just tied it on with a piece of string. So I've still got my little pink croc from when we first met. Yeah.
So we'll have to get you a new chain for that. So, but
maybe.
It's really nice what you say about creativity. And I say it's been really fun watching that evolve. And it works both ways, doesn't it? Because obviously you've sparked me on and it makes me a bit more daring, and, we properly play off each other. And I think some of the things like the continuity of carer ABC that we did with the Shrewsbury team. And it wasn't just like an A to Z, C is for continuity. It was when you came up with something like E is for elves, and you think, what? Do you remember the elves were to do with very neat stitching? And
that was the elves and the shoemaker,
because we were trying to
do very neat stitching, and you're less likely to have perineal tearing with continuity of care. That's correct. And the elves and the shoemaker, they just seemed to work. And then we were talking about the recent talk I'd given at the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We were talking about the labour ward lead spinning plates and having all these priorities. And I can't remember if it was you or me, one of us suggested the Modern Major General from Gilbert and Sullivan. And then I was just, that is absolutely it. It's like you have to be an expert in 3,000 different things up to an amazing level. And how can you possibly balance all those things? And
then we got Anna Anna Geyer to make our lovely graphic of the spinning plates that we could use on our slides. Pretty special.
I think it's the fact that I'll have an idea or you'll have an idea, and then we'll message each other and go, oh, got an idea, need to have a conversation. And then we'll have a conversation and we may start with one idea, like with the continuity of care ABC. I can't remember what we started with, but we started with something completely different. And then I was looking around my office and I've got an ABC of birth on the wall. And it was just, oh, we need to do an ABC. It's when we get together, we then have a completely different idea because we spark things in one another.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great.
And I definitely feel it's one of those 2 and 2 makes 5. It's not just additive. It's more than that. It's something that we're better together. There's more than just, that's the individual ideas. It's that bounce back and forth that really makes it work and really makes it happen. And I think because we're coming at things from slightly different angles, which is where, I mean, that's totally WhoseShoes, isn't it? But that idea that you've got one perspective, I've got another perspective, that's what really works.
And I think for me, and we've talked a lot about creativity and how I've, encouraged that in you and in me. But I think that kind of that whole reciprocity. And I mean, the thing that I wanted to talk about was WhoseShoes is basically the same tool as it has been since I first created it back in 2008. And it's always been intended to be action focused. But you've taken that, run with it, developed it in spades, and all you're interested really from a workshop is as absolutely should be the case, what's going to happen as a result of it. And to make the pledges, very real. And I think it's all very well people coming up with pledges at a workshop, but to kind of support people and nurture them, to follow them through. So right back to that very first Kingston workshop where, the graffiti board came from. Now, to me, that was a tension that was going on at the time. It was obviously new to maternity. We were working with the London Clinical Network. There's a pressure sometimes to have pledge made, date delivered, tick. And this was the opposite of that and I think obviously we were learning all the time, but some of the best things happen over a long period of time. Somebody's working on them. They can get dispirited. So tell us the story about the graffiti board, because that came from that very first workshop.
Yeah, so that was Balvinder's pledge. Balvinder she was one of our supervisors of midwives. She's now one of our matrons. And she pledged to put up a board. It wasn't even called a graffiti board at that point, but a board at the entrance to our maternity unit on which people could write their feedback with a piece of chalk. So a blackboard. And the workshop was October, and then it was about June, July the following year that she finally got the go-ahead for the graffiti board. And we've got 2. It's in the front of our entrance to our maternity building and also on one of our postnatal wards. And it's a blackboard, and people write in chalk. Sometimes they write feedback, but actually a lot of it is birth announcements. When it's a bit sad at the moment because we don't have kids in the unit because of COVID, but little siblings used to draw stuff about coming to visit their new baby sister or brother, or waiting with their mum for a scan to see the baby. And it's there to this day. Every now and again, obviously, we have to wipe it off and start again. So at the moment, I was looking at it yesterday, I love it because I love to see the names of the babies. And sometimes people come and put names of previous babies. And we do get some feedback, but it's like a massive celebration of the birth of all these babies and these families at Kingston. And it's been copied by quite a number of different hospitals now, actually, and has been written up as a case study. And Bal she just persevered. She had some initial problems with estates. They didn't want to have it. Then there was question about whether it could be a blackboard, chalkboard, or whether it had to be a whiteboard. And yeah, she just plodded quietly away in the background, and then it went up, and it's been a phenomenon, really. It's great. I really like it when I leave work and there's a little baby Florence announced on it.
I bet,
That's just my bias, but yeah, it's great.
And you mentioned in passing them, but it's so important, case studies, and I think that's something that you've been very, very influential with, to try and capture the best practice things that come along, the really kind of like easily transferable things that somebody else, completely independently, regardless of whose shoes or maternity workshops or anything, can just pick up and think, well, would this work for us? Should we adapt it a little bit? And we've given people we've got 3 books of case studies now, haven't we, from the various maternity projects?
Yeah. And I think the action and the case studies they're really important. And they take work. Putting on a workshop is quite a lot of work, but making sustained change, it does happen because people feel inspired and enthused, and also almost like they've got permission, or that they don't need permission to take action and do things. And then kind of capturing that afterwards and making people realize that actually it does work, and that if you're constantly kind of in a very bureaucratic way going up through an NHS hierarchy and red tape and stuff, it's very difficult to get stuff done. Whereas if you actually have a bit of a groundswell of opinion and thought and people wanting to do stuff after a workshop, it's that case of many hands make light work, isn't it? But pulling together the case studies, it is harder work than you think, to get people to put down on paper, okay, what have you done? How have you done it? What are the challenges? What are the things that you'd suggest to someone else? But then it's so valuable because other hospitals can copy. And it's back a bit to what I talked about in that merry-go-round episode of don't keep reinventing the wheel. Don't keep trying to do the same thing. Actually, let's share those ideas. So I'm very proud of those case studies. And
I think for me, they've given me a tremendous kind of bank of material when I'm running another workshop and someone comes up with an idea, not reinvent the wheel. We perhaps have a look at that case study, or perhaps something else spins off from it. And I think the satisfaction it gives to people to kind of develop those ideas. And I think that, really important part of our conversation here, how we've worked with women and families, people like Lee Kendall, suggesting that she, as sadly a bereaved mum, can help write a more empathetic letter. Now, that's something that I've been able to use, that idea, throughout my work. So regardless of what topic it is, these letters, perhaps during COVID or whatever it is, land on somebody's, mat at the door, and they open them. And we've done some poems around this, haven't we, Flo, in terms of admin, and Mr. Blenkinsop's clinic, and the appointment arrives that was 2 days ago, and it becomes your fault, and all sorts of different things. But I think the point I'm trying to make is to involve the people in knowing how it feels to receive that letter, and to make it more empathetic and to make it more informative as well. And some of the things that have spun off from that, from my point of view, and in terms of WhoseShoes during COVID, have been very much around messaging. So people talk about communication, but, that answer phone message or whatever it is that might just seem fine to you to bang out a message, but the kind of like receiving end of that, we've had a poem, "If your call is urgent," well, it's urgent to me. I don't call the doctor easily, and that kind of thing. And just that, if it promises that something will happen as a result of if you phone such and such a number, and then it's completely different experience, and it doesn't help you, it doesn't serve you. So I suppose a big part of Whose Shoes is trying to join things up. And, I'm thinking about the opportunity we had, incredibly fortunate, I think, with Kate Grimes when she was chief executive of Kingston, and giving us the opportunity to do some work together in other areas of the hospital. And just, I think that was a story that really stood out for me, in that it was about trust, and it was about, she was really valuing what we were doing. And rather than as a chief executive saying, you must do X, Y, Z, there was obviously leadership, but I think she trusted us to see where the energy within the hospital would go and how best to develop it. And that felt pretty special.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we looked at some admin issues as part of that, and also operating theatres. And I remember doing the operating theatre workshop, and day surgery didn't really want to be part of it. And then they got a bit jealous and wanted their own workshop afterwards. It was quite interesting. And
you got me going around the hospital in scrubs with you so that I could properly understand. Yeah. And that was me well outside my comfort zone.
So just knocking my microphone over there, obviously. That was really fun. And also the little things that make a difference, like whether you've got your glasses in recovery, if you're a glasses wearer, which for me would be a major thing, because I can't see hardly anything without my glasses. I feel lost without my glasses. So it'd be really important.
And then for me, how it linked in with some of my other kind of subject areas. So in terms of, again, that kind of recovery room, if someone's confused and perhaps it's someone with dementia, it could be put down to, well, they've got, someone living with dementia, but actually to separate out what's the norm for this person and to know enough about the real person to be, making sure in terms of patient safety that not everything is just dismissed as a condition. It's fascinating.
Just coming back to what you were saying about involving people using services and that kind of co-production, I think for me, the beginning, I remember when we were doing the first workshop, I actively went and got people who'd written complaints to come and attend. And that was a really good way forward, actually. So I think all too often you can kind of get people that are happy with how things are. And I think one of the kind of challenges were, well, will people using the service want to come in and involve themselves in a workshop? Oh my God, they're falling over themselves. They want to give feedback. They want to get involved. They want to drive change. And particularly if they haven't had a great experience, because they don't want someone else to have that experience. And also, I remember people saying to me after the first workshop that they hadn't kind of realised how much the doctors and midwives did really care about what they were doing, and how difficult it was to do some of the things that we wanted to do. And I think an appreciation from families using our services that actually people are genuinely trying to do the right thing, and that actually it's not as easy as you think, and we're human beings too. And then us listening and understanding what effect, inadvertently saying something negative, or is even something you think isn't negative, can have on that person, whether you're chatting and the person is overhearing staff moaning or complaining about something, that how that makes them feel. So I think there's always been a bit of a challenge with some of the work we've done about, well, will you get people to come, and how will you get people to come? And the answer is, if you actually ask them and open your doors and invite them in, people will come, because they want to tell you what they think.
And I think it's all about, and there's something I very much see with our WhoseShoes workshops. We talk about creating the conditions, because people say, you know, I think as you know, Flo, I've got such an aversion to tick boxes. They kind of just, you know, I've got such a radar around tick boxes. And, you know, people say, oh, we want feedback. And you think, well, do you really? Or do you want to tick a box? You know, but if you create the conditions, which is everything really in terms of how you invite people, whether they feel that you want them to come, whether you make them feel welcome. Cake obviously is a very, you know, great thing for people, but anything really that just makes people feel that their opinion and their voice is valued, and that feeds right through to following up afterwards, rather than, you know, we've got the feedback, thank you very much. So the whole genuine co-production, I think not very many people really get. And, you know, it's been fantastic working with you for that, because you totally get it.
I think people don't like it because it's messy and uncomfortable.
And they don't know
Sometimes when I'm talking to my husband and I'm saying, oh, you know, why don't they understand? Why aren't they happy with this? He's, well, you know, it makes life more complicated for them, Florence. It's much easier to just kind of gloss over the top and say you're listening, but not really be. And yeah, I think it's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it takes you to whole new places. And I think that's something I've learned a bit from you, is when people ask for things, to come back and challenge them a little bit and go, okay, so you want me to do a workshop, or you want me to do this, this and this. Do you really want me to? Are you really going to be interested in what people are saying? And are you really going to take account of that? Because if so, yes, I'm going to get on and do that. But actually, if it's a bit of a tick box, a bit half-hearted, no, it's not really going to happen, then there's no point putting in the effort in the first place.
Yeah. And that sort of feeds into, I mean, if I get an inquiry and, you know, you might get somebody with, if you like, positional power and, or, you know, I've heard about this WhoseShoes thing, I'd like to roll it out across my region. That just so isn't how it works. You know, so we'll find one place that, you know, there's some ingredients, aren't there? You know, a passionate person, people who really want to make change, someone who perhaps wants to be a bit of a, innovator. And, you know, if that starts within, say, a region, then others will look on. It's a bit like your day theatres and main theatres, isn't it? You want other people to look on and think, what's happening over there? We want to be part of it.
Yeah, completely. I was going to say, well, I was wondering if we should talk a bit about lemons.
Do you think we should?
Well, some people listening to this will know we have a bit of a thing about lemons.
We do.
We did take lemons to NHS Expo.
We did.
And we even went to a lemon festival. So I didn't know if we should elaborate and think, why lemons?
Well, I think we should definitely talk about lemon light bulbs. I mean, I think you've kind of touched upon lemon light bulbs. And I think the thing that kind of gives me goosebumps, really, and you think that all of this difficulty and all of this angst is actually worth it, is when you see people at workshops getting lemon light bulb moments. Now, I mean, I would define those as possibly the sort of people you were talking about, a clinician who hasn't realised they're good people, they just haven't realised the impact of those particular words, or perhaps looking at a screen rather than looking at the woman, or whatever it happens to be, that they kind of almost go into themselves and reflect. And you can almost see it in their eyes, and then they may or may not choose to share that. And then when they do, and sometimes, I mean, there have been some extraordinary moments. I remember one event in particular where one quite senior person, I mean, WhoseShoes is very no hierarchy, just people. So I shouldn't necessarily know who the senior people are, because we're sitting around with a name badge that says Gill and Flo, and we're not wearing NHS uniforms. And this person had been quite annoying and quite dominant on her table. And when we got to the pledges part, like, you know, who'd like to make the first pledge? And sure enough, she grabbed a microphone and I thought, oh, here we go. Because it's like the opposite of what I want. I want someone who perhaps has never dreamt of grabbing a microphone in their whole life, but they're so fired up with what they want to do. But this person basically said that she wanted to say how much she'd learnt from sitting around talking to women and families and junior staff, and how she needed to listen more. And she was pretty much in tears. And I thought to say that so openly in front of her own team was incredibly brave. And that was like, you know, a mega lemon light bulb moment. But in terms of, so why lemons, Flo?
Well, a bit of fun. It kind of started because we were videoing something for NHS Change Day and you were wearing a big yellow jacket.
Was. I haven't worn it much since.
And the video got, as I remember it, the video got edited so that you were literally just standing next to me all yellow, not really saying anything.
Just like a noddy dog.
So it sort of started from there. But I mean, like we were discussing before we started recording, it's almost like that's irrelevant now. Anytime I go anywhere, in fact, I took a photo for you yesterday of some papier-mâché lemons. I'll have to send it to you. Anytime I go anywhere and see anything to do with lemons, the children know I'm going to whip my phone out and take a photo and send it to you.
Or buy me some daft present.
And when I started my podcast and I kind of was researching a bit how to do a podcast and thinking about you need to have a bit of a structure. And like you say, I'm very action focused. I wanted to have a kind of message at the end of each podcast. And so I just thought, well, obviously it has to be the zesty bit because it has to be the zest, the essence, you know, from the lemon. So the whole lemon thing is just a bit of a joke, really, isn't it? And that kind of brings us back to the thing of you can be doing really, really good stuff in terms of quality improvement and making a difference, but it needs to be fun. And the lemons are a bit of fun. And now we've got lemon light bulbs, and then we actually found some lemon kind of Christmas lights, which they're actually draped over my pin-up board in my office next to me. So it's just kind of a random thing that's just become a bit of a joke. And then we even went to the Lemon Festival. We discovered there was a whole lemon festival. I think actually maybe Zoe, Adam Bajilan's mum, messaged us about the Lemon Festival.
I think she did.
Shouldn't we go there? And we looked at it and we were kind of like, oh my God, it's a whole festival of lemons in the south of France.
And it was in its 86th year. Can you imagine what it was like when it started?
And I think even though it's just totally random, that is one of the funniest, just best trips I've ever had. It was just totally insane. All these amazing figures, fairy tale figures built out of lemons, and a lemon procession, and the whole town just covered in lemons. It was just bonkers lemon people like us.
And it kind of spoiled
our doula. We met a doula in the queue, didn't we?
We did. Israeli, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I think. And we were just chatting in the queue, that's right. But it kind of spoiled our it kind of spoiled our gifts for each other, because suddenly every shop was full of lemony gifts, wasn't it? Whereas before it had been something like, you know, quite niche that we could find each other.
Yeah. But that was epic. So, but I think the thing from that is fun.
And drawing people in, I think to find something that draws people in. I mean, I think that goes, and it's interesting how similar the themes are across kind of all my work, regardless of the subject matter. And we're all people, you know, we're all vulnerable sometimes. We all want to have a bit of fun. And I think if you can tap into those elements, then the rest just follows. But if you don't, then it becomes an official kind of feedback, tick boxy or whatever it is.
Yeah, because we get people messaging us all the time, don't they? Or they've seen a random lemon dress or a lemon thing and they're a lemon gif and they'll send it to us. So it kind of, it's also that kind of community energy. Because I remember when we started, you saying, did you register the hashtag MatX?
I did.
You put it on something so it would be measured.
Simpler it was.
And I thought, I don't really understand what she's doing, but I don't know. And you were, we need a hashtag and this is what it will be. And I thought, okay, well, I trust you because I've got no idea what I'm doing. And it just took off incredibly in terms of just building a fantastic conversation about maternity, not only within this country, but people in Australia. We've got people in India sometimes, we've got people in Ireland, we've got people all over the place. Just send us stuff using that hashtag. And it's really built a community of people who are interested in improving maternity services, whether that is people working in the service, people using the service. It just really took off. And that sort of brings me to the MatX Challenge Fund, in that it got so successful that NHS England and the Department of Health, when they put out some money for improving maternity experience, called it the MatX Challenge Fund. And I must admit, this is another kind of key point. We were a bit annoyed because it was kind of our thing and it was a bit, you've hijacked our thing and you're kind of taking it away from us. And I remember feeling a bit like, well, I'm not going to apply for that. And then feeling like I don't have any ideas. And it was a really short time frame to apply. And yes, just feeling a bit hacked off, really. And
we hadn't been mentioned in the maternity review. I think that was the key thing.
Oh, yes.
That was what really hacked us off. Yeah.
There should be a grassroots movement of people working in maternity and service users. And we were, sorry, what do you mean there should be? There is. We are. Yes. Yeah,
it was quite a mealy-mouthed paragraph, that was. I think that was the thing that really hacked us off. But then acknowledging it, not officially like that as a best practice thing or anything like that, but then taking the name and putting out a challenge for something very similar to what we were already doing.
Yeah.
In fact, the same,
I was really annoyed. I was really annoyed. And I think you said sleep on it.
And you didn't sleep very much because you were trying to phone me at 4 a.m.
Yeah, I didn't sleep at all. So this is the other thing that's great about our friendship, is that I'm up early and Jill goes to bed late. So I was up. My brain was absolutely buzzing. I had this idea of what we could do, which became Nobody's Patient, but it wasn't called Nobody's Patient then. And it was inspired by Lee Kendall, who you've already mentioned, and her son Hugo, and the experience she'd had being in intensive care and Hugo being in neonatal care, and the kind of lack of joined up thinking. So falling through gaps between the maternity service, the neonatal service, intensive care and the maternity service. And I just suddenly thought, oh my God, that's it. We could do something with that. And I remember I was actually sitting on a bench in a park ringing Lee at a point at which I felt vaguely she might be up, and talking her through the idea. And then you had met Catherine on a train.
That's right.
I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that.
So I'd met Catherine McClellan coming back from a conference, I think, up north somewhere, and we'd just chatted. And this had been like just 2 weeks before that. And she'd told me about, sadly, she'd had multiple losses in pregnancy, including several babies in the middle of pregnancy, and how that was in danger of falling between support for what people would traditionally see as miscarriage or obviously stillbirth. And the more she spoke to me, I was just so moved by her and by her story. And I'd said to her, Catherine, if I ever get a chance to do something about this through Whose Shoes, it would work, because the whole idea of different perspectives and people not realizing, that something like 24 weeks as a administrative date within pregnancy, doesn't mean anything at all in terms of a woman and what's happening in her body and you know, what date she might sadly lose her baby. You know, I'll try and do something about that. So then when you came back, Flo, and suggested the idea that led to Nobody's Patient, we were looking at two different themes originally, weren't we? And we kind of added on the third one about this mid-trimester loss.
Yeah,
and we
did.
I mean, working with Catherine to develop those scenarios and a very small group of couples, mainly women, some of them just women on their own, and some couples, and with Anna as a graphic artist, just sitting in a small room in Birmingham with Catherine bringing more food than you can imagine. It was one of the most moving experiences I think I've ever had, just to be part of that intimate conversation. There was only one conversation happening, so no post-it notes or anything, with Anna very sensitively recording the key issues that came up. And that's how we sourced the material for that part of the project. It was an incredible project.
The thing I loved about the project was it was co-produced from the very start. So the bid was co-produced with Lee and Catherine, and then just went from there.
And I think it's important to say that the bid was co-produced. I think it was such a collaborative bid because, as I saw it, the London Clinical Network, was it Donna Ockenden and Donald Peebles, more or less gave us a blank sheet. It was like, a bit like I was saying earlier with Kate Grimes, we believe in you. We've seen what you've done with the original project. We're part of this. And then to get the various other parties, Kingston Hospital, St George's Hospital, it was a mega collaborative bid.
It completely was. I'm feeling like, so we've said we might have to do more than one chat together.
We could talk all day.
We could talk all day. So I'm kind of feeling like we should probably come to the end of today, to be continued.
Yes, boss.
But before we do that, you're the one that's always egging me on, boss. Before there's one thing that I've done before you, and we're going to end on that, which is I started a podcast.
You did.
Here we are on the WhoseShoes, the podcast, and it's one of the few things that I've jumped in head first, not knowing what I'm doing, with you behind me, and now you're going to start a podcast. So I don't know, perhaps to end, we should talk a little bit about what is up and coming Wildcard.
Oh, thanks, Flo. It's been such a crazy idea, really. And I mean, definitely one that I'm following you 100% on. But I've so enjoyed, I've listened to all of your podcasts. I really enjoy the WhoseShoes, and I've seen the difference it makes. So now it's my kind of mission to get it into all medical education and, you know, everywhere. So you've definitely inspired me with the idea of a podcast, and there's some really good podcasts around, aren't there? So I had never planned to do a podcast, but then out of the blue, and it really was out of the blue, I got named as an HSJ 100 wildcard. I didn't know what one of those was. And I genuinely, I mean, we've got a pretty ambivalent attitude, you and I, to awards and, yeah, but this to me seemed like, it's in keeping with WhoseShoes, you know, the wild card idea. I looked down at the list and I was wondering who might be in this 20 HSJ wildcards, and it's crazy. I was thinking perhaps it's my Twitter gang, or, you know, I didn't know who it would be. Most of them, I must put some time in to actually look them up and see who they are. I don't know. There's a lovely guy called Clinton who's a friend of mine, in Birmingham. So I'll link up with Clinton. And then other people were like Marcus Rashford and, Gareth Southgate. And I was kind of trying to work out what was going on. It seemed to me that perhaps whoever the panel are had this kind of like fun idea, and it was to do with the changeover to the new chief exec of the NHS. Who is it that this new, at the time, not yet appointed person should be listening to? And as if they'd had a load of fun thinking, well, we need one of those and we need one of those, you know, so famous people and random people and so on. And they've got me down as a campaigner, and specifically as someone who's good at bringing in the voices of people who wouldn't normally be heard. And so I am flattered by that. I'm happy about that. But I'm thinking, well, really, if I met the chief exec of the NHS. I could have a conversation with them, but look at all the conversations they could have with all my wild network of lots and lots of wild cards from across society, really. So my idea now is to set up a podcast, a wildcard podcast, and just chat to people and probably say not very much myself and listen to what they've got to say. And that will build into a kind of resource, really. Lovely Sam Majumdar, my friend in Scotland, called it like pulling together a resource around the philosophy of life almost, but centred on the NHS, but the NHS as an opportunity to focus on wellness and well-being rather than just illness, and to recognise the role of social care and the community and so on. So I'm just going to talk to lots of random people. Now, the thing I'm not short of is people to talk to. I've had like amazing people I can talk to. And this is an exclusive, if you like. I'm going to kick off tomorrow. I don't know when it will go live, but I'm going to kick off tomorrow by recording a session with my lovely friend, Dr. Fazana Hussain, who is encouraging me and kind of like egging me on. She said, Jill, let's have an adventure. So
yeah,
that's what we're doing.
Well, I think it's going to be awesome. You have such an incredible network of so many interesting, enthusiastic and very diverse people. So I think it will be incredible. I look forward to listening.
Oh, thank you. And I'm hoping it will be fun, fun for everyone. Yeah.
Perfect. So I think we should leave it there. We talked a bit at the beginning about what would the zesty bit be from today. And I was thinking the zesty bit is finding someone that gives you energy and encourages you, pulls you slightly outside your comfort zone and kind of running with that. So taking the plunge and going with that, because it will take you to a much kind of richer, more interesting life, I guess. I don't know, Jill, what are your thoughts about a zesty bit?
I think that's perfect. I think, hopefully we could, the relationship that we've got, I think people can see that we have fun together. We've presented some workshops together and we bounce off each other. And I think it's always more fun to hear two voices or to be collaborative, to bring in other people. It just makes it interesting. And, that we shouldn't be afraid to call someone my friend, in terms of like being professional. We're all people, and you find the people that, your soulmates really, that you can properly kind of bounce off. And that fun, I think, energizes other people and just, it creates the outcome, the quality improvement. I mean, people, ask me in terms of, what model you use. Well, I don't know. You tell me, because you don't necessarily need a formal model. You need people and humanity, and then the rest can kind of grow from there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think this is a wrap. Thank you very much, Jill. And as the title of the episode is My Magic Mate, you're very, very much my magic mate. So thank you not only for today, but for being my magic mate.
And likewise, Flo. Thank you so much.
I do hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of the WhoseShoes. Feel free to contact me on Twitter at FWmaternity or at theobspod to ask me questions, give me topics for future episodes, or let me know what you think. It's absolutely fantastic when you get in touch. I really enjoy reading your comments. As usual, I've tried to include in the programme notes some extra reading about this particular topic, both for professionals working in maternity care and for pregnant women using services. I'd like to reassure you that although I'm talking about my experiences working in maternity care, I take confidentiality very seriously and do not give any personal information about any of my patients. If you've enjoyed listening, I'd love you to recommend the WhoseShoes to friends or colleagues, and please do leave me a review on whichever podcast directory you find my episodes. Many thanks for listening.